Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third installment of the Struggling to Be Well podcast. I'd like to welcome everybody here today. And just so I've done, obviously, two of them before, I'm going to try and make this one a little bit shorter. So this will probably be about 10, 12 minutes, hopefully. And I'll try and continue with that, I think, rather than do a marathon, 15 or 21 minute podcast. So I'm going to read now from a little bit from the book. Continue on with about my breakdown and what I went through at the time, and we'll start from there. Trying to deal with many conflicting thoughts of being tortured and murdered, I somehow thought that to get away I should hitchhike south to Windsor, Ontario, about 5 hours away. I went into a truck stop and asked the patrons if there was anyone going south. A truck driver spoke up and offered me a ride. Once in Windsor, I slept outside for a couple of nights on benches, not eating or drinking. One night, the police stopped by in a patrol car and asked me what I was doing, telling me to go to a hostel. I just told them I was too afraid to do that. In the afternoon of the next day, I went into a corner store and was so paranoid, but was starving for something to eat. I was about to purchase a chocolate bar, but kept checking and rechecking the ingredients to make sure that it wasn't something that would kill me. I could see the owner was watching me the whole time, probably trying to figure out what I was doing. I bought the bar, stepped out of the store, and ate it. Still paranoid and thinking that I had just eaten poison, I went into the parking lot, crouched down on my hands and knees, and put my fingers down my throat, making myself sick. The store owner came out and shouted, "What are you doing? Don't you ever come back here again." Deciding to go back to Toronto that night, I ended up hitchhiking back with another truck driver, helping him deliver some packages along the way. The heavy metal music he was playing in the truck seemed evil to me, and I was nervous and wary of him. We arrived near Toronto the next morning, and he was letting me off on a ramp to the highway, saying he was bypassing the city. I was feeble and weak, and at this point about 3 weeks into a fast, without much water, and as I got out of the truck and he left, I heard a horn and was nearly hit by a car on the highway. I got to a payphone and called my parents, telling them I was not well and that I wanted to come back to Thunder Bay. They actually sent me a plane ticket, which I picked up at the airport, walking to get there. I still had my passport at this time, but had thrown away my wallet and with all my other ID. Arriving in Thunder Bay with only my clothes on my back, I was very skinny since I hadn't eaten for quite a while. When Dad saw me, he said, "Jesus." Rob told me that is who Dad thought I looked like when he saw me with the long hair and beard. At first, for several days, I was still scared and confused and had trouble getting my words out, so afraid to say anything that could result in my being murdered by friends, by family, by anyone. I was also still smoking 2 packs a day, and every time I lit a cigarette, I thought it would result in my being murdered for this sin. Even with all these terrifying, convinced thoughts of imminent death, I still took me several months to quit smoking, which gave me a lot of empathy for people who are trying to quit smoking and as to how hard it really is. I would find out later that my parents were worried and my mother scared of how out of it I was. She hid out all the sharp knives, not giving me access to them. I'm sure they didn't have any idea what I was capable of in that state. However, I was sure of one thing: I wasn't capable of harming anyone except myself. I started eating again with the love and gentle prodding of my parents and got back to working at the greenhouses. In the spring of 1989, after seeming to be well for a while, I decided I wanted to go to Israel and work on a kibbutz, which is a commune, and there are over 300 of them in Israel. In my mid-20s, while I was living with Sarah, whom I used to clown with, her brother had come back from Israel and had worked on a kibbutz, telling many interesting stories about life on one. I always thought over the years that it sounded like a great way to live. I was given some books about Israel from a doctor friend of Dad's who lived in Thunder Bay. I did quite a bit of research, of course. It was 1989 and there was no internet or online, so it was all through reading books or hearing stories from other people. I saw that I was able to apply to volunteer once I arrived in Israel. I made all the arrangements, purchased my plane ticket, taking El Al, the Israeli airline, to get there. I had to go through heavy security in the Toronto airport to go to Israel. They took my bag to a table where they looked at the contents carefully and took the batteries out of my clock. They took a long look at my antipsychotic medication but decided to let me travel. I finally made it through security and got on the plane. During the last part of the flight, I was amazed that most of the men went to the back of the plane and were doing prayers while bobbing their upper body up and down like you would see at the Wailing Wall in Israel. I was thinking, is this safe with all the weight in the tail end? It was fine, and we arrived at the international airport in Lod, about 20 kilometers from Tel Aviv. I got a cab to Tel Aviv, arriving, walked around a bit, enjoying a beautiful hot day in the early spring. At that point, I had gone off my meds for about a week and a half or 2 weeks without my parents knowing. I had actually already started feeling unwell a week or so before leaving Thunder Bay. So once in Israel, it immediately escalated to off taste and strong odors, which through my illness, even to now, I'm very sensitive to smell and taste. So if I'm not on medication, within basically about a week, I'll start to develop hallucinations of taste and smell, and it's not like anything you would normally smell in society. Not any smell that you could say it tastes like this or smells like that. It's just something completely unique to my illness and this antipsychotic episode that I will go through if I don't stay on meds. As I was lying in bed in my hotel room, just looking at the ceiling, I noticed a very strong, odd smell wafting in from the open window. I closed the window and was trying to decide what to do, so frightened I couldn't even go outside anymore that evening. I made the decision to leave after that first night and got myself back to the airport. Of course, being very security orientated, they were extremely interested to know why, after one day, I was going back to Canada when I had a ticket booked for 3 months. I explained to them that I was having mental difficulty. They searched me thoroughly, went over my body with a metal detector, and after about an hour of interrogation, decided they would let me go back. I got a ticket for the first plane leaving the following day, but it was going via Germany, as there were no direct flights that day going back to Toronto. I spent the night in the airport and headed to Frankfurt the next morning. When I arrived in Frankfurt, I started having an episode and was very paranoid, resolving to get off the plane and not continue to Toronto. The problem was we were already taxiing down the runway ready to take off. I stopped the flight attendant as she walked by and told her I needed to get off the plane, that I was having a medical issue. They turned around going back to the terminal, which I'm sure a lot of the passengers weren't happy about, and I got off the plane. I wandered around the airport for the whole evening, very paranoid, not knowing what to do. And I actually bought a little big piece of cheese and a bun, and I didn't eat that as well. So I was trying to eat at that point, but more scared of the food because of the taste and smells than I was able to actually eat it. When I did try to eat food, it made me kind of gag, and the tastes were so strong and off that I just couldn't eat it. The next day, I took a taxi to downtown Frankfurt by the train station and walked around the streets for the whole day, back and forth, trying to calm myself, scared out of my wits. It was starting to get dark, and at that point I had thought the day was never going to end and felt that somehow several weeks had gone by. I went back downtown and got a hotel room by the train station. The hotel room also smelled funny to me, and so did the room, and I was having all kinds of scared negative thoughts. I went down to the front desk and asked for my money back, saying I couldn't stay there. The owner was none too pleased. Going outside, I wandered around for about another hour and decided I did not want to stay in the hotel. I went back in and told the owner I wanted to stay after all. He refused to let me stay, so I went back out into the night. So that section was from A Complete Mental Breakdown, part of the book, and we'll get into more detail about that in future podcasts. I'm going to read a little bit about the band years as well from the section from that, and we'll go from there. Thank you. After trying several types of jobs in Thunder Bay in 1976, I ended up going to the community college to study electronics repair. I was 6 months into the one-year course when one of the students told me he might know of a job for me with a traveling band playing in Nipigon, where he lived. It was a band from Toronto called the Richard Gordon Review, who were looking for a drummer. I found that prospect exciting and said I was interested. He gave them my number and they called that evening, but they were so desperate I was hired without an audition. They picked me up with my drums and off we went to Sioux Lookout, a small town west of Thunder Bay. After the several-hour highway drive and another few hours driving off the highway, We arrived that night before playing and asked a passerby where the bar was. The girl said, "Oh, you must be the band." I guess they didn't get many tourists there. The next afternoon, we set up our equipment and went over a few of the songs on stage which we were going to play that night. I was elated and beyond excited. After playing about 3 or 4 songs, the leader of the band, Gord, said to the rest of the band, "He's not much, but he's all we've got." While that comment stunned me and knocked me down a few pegs, it helped me to realize that I wasn't really all that good yet. Ray, the sax player, was a great mentor to me as he would practice several hours every day, which set a great example for me to follow. During my 3 months with this band, I started practicing many hours each day, which I would continue doing for years. I became very dedicated and would play with a band 4 hours a night, waiting for the club to close at 1 o'clock in the morning, then practice while the cleaners worked. I'd continue to work on many styles and rhythms till about 4 in the morning, teaching myself how to read drum charts. I'd go to bed, get up around noon, and practice till about 2 in the afternoon in our room with scaled down versions of my drums. I used towels on top of the drums to deaden the sound, so I'd have dinner around 5 o'clock, and after dinner I'd practice for a couple more hours. This became my routine for about 5 years with several bands while on the road. Years earlier, as a child, I had taken piano lessons for 2 years. Many times I needed to work in Thunder Bay at the family greenhouses from winter to spring to make enough money to go back and live in Toronto. After a long day working, I'd go into the soil shed where my drums were set up and practice for 3 or 4 hours. The shed wasn't heated, so my mom bought me a little space heater to use while practicing. I'd pile the boxes 6 feet high all the way around my drum set and put a cover of greenhouse plastic on top of the boxes, which kept the warmness from the heater in. For a couple of years while on the road, I took my digital metronome and put it under my pillow at night to try and help myself feel steady timing and improve my drumming. I'd start out very slow, each night increasing the pulse by 2 beats a minute, until many days later it was set at the fastest tempo. So I actually slept like that with it under my pillow, as I'd mentioned, and it didn't seem to bother me. It kind of lulled me to sleep, and it did actually help with my timing after a long period of time. That, as well as what I also did, I'd have an earphone in, and I'd listen to music while I was playing along with the music, and that helped me get a feel better for music as well. And I tried many different styles for that practice. I then go back to the slowest tempo again. I'd go to sleep like this and wake up in the morning refreshed and feeling the beat. I'd also practice my drumming along with music while wearing headphones. I worked at it a lot. In Gord's band, I was 17 years old. I probably looked more like 13 years old, but told them I was 18, which was the drinking age at that time. I believe now that Gord, who was also a very talented artist, knew that I was underage, as every day he would black pencil in my thin little mustache to make me look older. So, of course, I was doing that once in a while and I ended up with black pencil marks from the I guess it was like a pastel or a chalk pencil. I don't quite remember, but it had a little black mustache that was obviously penciled in, but we did it anyway. I started calling my mom every Sunday around this time, something I continued to do for many years. My mom knew that if she didn't hear from me for a few weeks, that I wasn't doing well and had probably quit a band or been fired. I just didn't want to call and burden her with my problems when things weren't going great. At one bar where the Richard Gordon Review played in Fort Francis, Ontario, the owner asked me several times how old I really was. I just kept repeating, 18 going to be 19. He would reply, "Are you sure it's not 17 going to be 18? Soon after, I would just start telling people I was 20 years old. I was always a little afraid of my actual being found out. So I think that's all the reading I'll do for today. I'm not sure exactly how much time this was, but I'm hoping it's the 10-12 minute after I put everything together. Just want to remind everybody, if you would please, if you wouldn't mind subscribing on the YouTube channel and putting a like on there if you do like the video. And also there's a link on there too for all my artwork, music, and books. For the Linktree link is that one, or if you just wanted to see the book itself, you could go to the link that just says book only. So thanks very much for checking this podcast out. I look forward to number 4, and I hope I continue to get more subscribers. And it's an exciting time for me. I'm really enjoying it, and I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you very much.